Hey, what's up everyone? My name is the MercilessWalrus, otherwise known as the worst singer in the wasteland. If you stay till the end of the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, today I was originally going to talk about the cold case quest in Fallout 76. I found it to be one of the more amusing ones. It has a storyline that doesn't necessarily follow exactly as I expected, but I found that in recording the video, I spent half the time talking about quests in general and what I think could be improved, the problems I see with them, some of the things I think this one sort of gets right, and I decided that we'd be better served just doing a video on quests in general, using this cold case quest as sort of a launching point or a case study for the discussion. Now, if you don't give a shit about this particular quest, either because you've done it or you just couldn't care less about quests in general based on your past experience, I'm going to leave the timestamp for where I actually start talking about quests in general right here, as well as in the video description. So feel free to skip ahead, but for those of you who want to hear my voice for as long as possible, let's just dive into what this quest is all about, why it stood out to me, and then we can go from there. So you can find the cold case quest towards the north part of your map at the Wavy Willards Water Park, which looked like it was going to be a really cool place to explore, and like an unfortunately large number of locations like that on the map, it didn't quite live up to expectations, but we did meet this lovely robot with a French accent named Miss Annie, who told us about this boy who's been missing. Shocker for, 25 years, so I immediately am thinking, alright, this boy's dead. He's either a grown-up adult and has figured shit out, or he is very, very dead. But like all robots in this game, Miss Curie is not concerned about all the scorched and/or ghouls surrounding her posing a very immediate threat. No, she is concerned with this missing boy. What happened to him? Where is he? Well, that's why we are here to help. Our mission starts off by going to the security office to try to hunt down some holotapes that employees of the park were listening through before the bombs fell, which Miss Annie can't go check out herself because, reasons, I guess? Anyway, we go to that security office, look in the terminal, and instead of having the holotapes, it tells us where to find them throughout the park. So then we gotta go rummage around the park, and we come across holotapes that sound like a man offering this young boy, whose name is Freddy, a gift. And Freddy gets all excited. It sounds like he might have seen this man before, but my immediate thought is, okay, pedophile. Big pedophile alert. I know where this is going. But before I was able to jump to too many conclusions, we learn a couple other things at the water park. We find a P.O. box that may be associated with the man who took Freddy. We also learn about this sort of collar, tracking collar type thing that's, I don't know, it's very concerning that Freddy's parents had him attached with this. Seems very overprotective, but it's a way that we could potentially find his location. But it's, lo and behold, when we find it at the top of the slippery, slithery snake water slide, or whatever the fuck it's called, yeah, his little tracking collar is not working. So we have the choice either to repair this collar, or tracking thing, I forget which it is, or we can go to the P.O. box to find out the household of the guy who took Freddy. I, of course, was not smart enough to repair Freddy's tracking thingy, so I went to the post office in Clarksburg, where I found out the P.O. box was related to a man named Otis Pike. From there, we can find the location of Otis's pre-war home, where we immediately see a letter of termination. So this guy got fired. Alright, so, some pent-up energy. We'll see where he transfers that to. But then, going down to his computer terminal towards the bottom, we see that this guy knew some shady shit about his employer. And he was ready to go to the media with that. And I believe he did, and that resulted, of course, in him then getting fired. So to get back, he took some drastic measures. As you already could have guessed, poor Otis decided to kidnap Freddy, the son of Otis's former employer, and hold him for ransom to try to get back and have some sort of semblance of justice in the world and make things right against an employer that was doing some what sounds like really shady and unethical shit. From Otis's house, we find out that he was holding Freddy in a dam. And this is the only part of the quest that gave me a little trouble, but I'm going to show you here how you enter the actual building where the quote-unquote clues are hidden. You have to go around the back to this pipe, which then feeds inside a bunch of super mutants. This is the only part that might be tough for if you're a low level, but I was like 12 or 13, I think, and I didn't have too much trouble with it. Anyway, once you go through the pipe that I showed you there, you start picking up these notes from Freddy and other pieces of evidence that help paint the actual story. And this is the part that I actually found pretty enjoyable from a narrative standpoint. I started off thinking, alright, pedophile. But really, it was a disgruntled worker who tried to get back in an unfair world, and then, spoiler alert, seriously, spoiler alert, it turns out Freddy's a fucking psychopath. He enjoys being kidnapped, and he's like, I'm no longer having fun, and soon enough we find out he sabotages and may or may not have just directly killed Otis, and then escaped. That's some crazy shit. The last clue we find tells us that Freddy went home to try to find his parents, but at that point, bombs were starting to fall, or at least they knew that they were starting to, so no one was home. Freddy was lost and confused, didn't know where to go. He tried to find his parents, but, I mean, let's be realistic. The kid probably died as soon as the bombs hit, and that's the whole story. We go back to Miss Annie. She is oddly optimistic that Freddy figured shit out. I'm not sure why. He's 99.9% sure died then, and 0.1% chance he died very shortly after, but whatever. Anyway, that is a mostly complete summary of the cold case quest in Fallout 76. And yes, as I'm sure someone has already pointed out in the comments before making it this far in the video, I did not provide 100% of the details related to this quest. I just wanted to provide enough so you could get an idea of what the player needs to do, what the overall narrative flow is, so on and so forth, and I didn't want this video to be like 40 minutes. But before we dive into my many gripes with quests in this game as a whole, let's just take a moment to analyze and break down the pros and cons of what I see as an above-average quest in this game. On the pro side, this, to me at least, was a pretty funny and pretty absurd quest. Between all the crazy shit that Otis's employer was doing, the fact that he tried to get back and kidnap the kid, and then his parents didn't even want him back because they knew he was crazy, and then this kid just, again, psychopath, totally out of his mind. The world is a better place for him dying when the bombs fell. Hot take, but I'm sticking with it. On top of that, it is a pretty unexpected story. If you started this quest and predicted exactly how it would play out, you're insane. That's not a normal thought process to have upon a robot telling you that she's worried about a missing child. But personally, this quest at least did a good job of keeping me curious and wanting to find out a bit more and how this story actually unfolded. And aside from the fact that it is pretty unique within this game, that's about where the list of pros end. Meanwhile, on the con side, this is a meaningless quest. And you have a pretty certain feeling about that as soon as you get started. You know that whatever actions you take, the world around you will be no different. This boy is dead regardless, and all you're doing is comforting a robot that has been stuck in an amusement park for decades now. It also doesn't help that while I was invested in the narrative and finding out what happened, I wasn't invested in the characters themselves whatsoever. We know from the start that everyone's dead, and all we get to really hear from them to build any kind of emotional profile are a couple holotapes, some written notes, and a few terminal entries, which helps, but compared to what we're used to in this franchise, it's kinda insufficient. And last but not least, while the narrative itself is not linear and is pretty unexpected throughout, the path that you take as a player is very linear, aside from the decision on whether or not you're going to repair Freddy's tracking device or not. And this is less of a con in isolation of this quest, because plenty of quests in the past games that were great were very linear and there was only one possible path and outcome to pursue, but when every quest is like that, then the game is missing something, if you ask me. Now, with that out of the way, it's time we talk about why the vast majority of quests in Fallout 76 fucking suck compared to Fallout 3, New Vegas, and even Fallout 4. And while I'm sure there are aspects that I'm not going to touch on that relate to why most of the quests in this game just feel so hollow and underwhelming, I've boiled it down to 4 key differences between this game and past Fallout games that make them especially shitty to pursue. Those 4 being, and the smart ones among you may have already been able to guess some of these, but 1, a lack of NPCs, a big complaint from the majority of Fallout fans that have played this game. The second one related to that is a lack of any kind of dialogue system. You can listen to holotapes and robots tell their stories and ask things from you, but there's no interaction from a dialogue standpoint. The third, and this is one that I'm really going to want to get into, is a lack of player choice or decision making, and just how linear a lot of these quests are. And the fourth one is a lack of outcomes, and how even the most influential of quests in these games don't seem to change much in the world around you. That one is more so a product of it being a strictly multiplayer game, and is the one I'm going to talk the least about as far as what could have been changed. But from an enjoyment and fulfillment standpoint, it really takes a lot out of what you would have gotten in past games when pursuing what feel like big and really consequential quests. On that note, let's get started and sink our teeth into this plate of shit we have been served, starting with the most baffling absence from this game, NPCs. Now, before I get into a few of the more obvious ways Bethesda could have incorporated NPCs in a multiplayer Fallout, we're going to start with what their absence means as far as quests, and why they're such a pivotal part in terms of how empty these quests feel and how meaningless and unengaging they tend to be. Two of the more obvious factors of this link straight to my broader points of how there is no dialogue, there is no interactiveness with a lot of these quests, and how the consequences, if any, don't really feel that impactful. And while I definitely want to talk about those, the bigger points separate from those aspects are that these quests feel totally devoid of any emotional connection or engagement. I don't give a shit about what I'm doing. I'm not helping someone out. I'm not hunting someone down who's done some bad shit. No, instead, I get the pleasure of helping out a robot who's stuck 25 years in the past, or following the instructions of a holotape recorded by someone who I will certainly never meet or interact with. With only a few noteworthy exceptions, all of the quests in past Fallout games that made me feel angry, satisfied, guilty, or just plain upset related to the characters that I was either helping or hurting through my actions. Sure, there were a few quests in past Fallout games that had you dive into some vault and discover all the fucked up shit they were doing down there, and you'd feel mortified upon reading through all the terminals and listening to some holotapes, but those kind of experiences aren't even present in Fallout 76 as it exists, and even in those other games, if that was the only kind of emotional stimulation you were getting, it wouldn't be enough on its own. And on top of the quests in Fallout 76 completely lacking an emotional connection, they also are so predictable because of this lack of NPCs. Sure, the one I covered today did have a bit of a twist. I was expecting it to just be your normal pedophile story, but it turns out the guy was stealing the kid to use him as a bargaining chip, and the kid turned out to be even crazier than that guy. That was kind of interesting, but most quests where it says, find this person and figure out this thing, or go listen to this holotape and hunt this person down, they're all dead. They're all either dead or they're robots. Every time. And I know that's not central to the game, but it still makes what otherwise would have been a somewhat interesting quest in past games just totally expected and not really engaging in the slightest. Now, I don't want to harp on that aspect too much, because you can make a quest unpredictable and add some twists and turns without having NPCs or any of the other things I'm talking about. So, yeah, that's a little less important. But a couple things that are largely missing, if not entirely, that can't be understated are the lack of dialogue, which ties directly to the lack of NPCs, as well as the lack of player choice. Not only does having no dialogue whatsoever eliminate a lot of the personality that was present in the worlds of these previous Fallout games, and also takes away one of the best vehicles for telling an engaging story, but it also strips me of what choice and freedom I had of being the kind of character I wanted to be, or playing the kind of game I wanted to. Whether I want to be funny, an asshole, helpful, or not helpful whatsoever, I could achieve a lot of that both through my actions, but also through dialogue and how I engaged with characters. Whereas now, if I want to be an asshole or a bad guy, I can go harass low-level players and ignore quests as I receive them, which doesn't even feel like I'm making a choice. It feels like I'm ignoring choices. or, harassing players, which is just a choice, but a bad one and not one that should even be present in the game, if you ask me. And player choice goes far beyond just deciding what kind of person you want to be in this world. In the context of quests, it meant how you were going to pursue it and what kind of experience you had while pursuing this goal. Whether you were going to try to negotiate for a better reward or use your high charisma to find out information that might not otherwise be available, or if it's going to be deciding which side of a battle or two factions you're going to help out. Those are all huge aspects that just aren't present. You get one choice. You follow the quest. Maybe you can skip a step if you know how to craft a certain device or if you find a certain thing or whatever. But for the most part, they're very linear. And I compare this with one of my favorite quests from previous games, the Megaton quest in Fallout 3, where you could either choose to disarm the bomb at the heart of this town, Megaton, and save the people and be a hero, or you could team up with those assholes at Tenpenny Tower, or, elitists and masters of luxury, if you happen to like that kind of stuff, and blow the town up and kill everyone in it. That's a huge decision that you could make, and it totally impacts the experience you have when pursuing that quest in a way that makes it feel unique to you. Whereas now, I know what I'm getting. I'm pursuing a very direct quest line. Maybe the narrative changes, but I have no choice or decision as far as where it's going to go or how I'm going to pursue it. And that goes for almost every quest I've gone after in Fallout 76 so far. And before I wrap up this video with my recommendations for how Bethesda could implement NPCs and therefore better and more engaging quests in a multiplayer Fallout, the last aspect of why these quests feel so empty is because the outcomes and consequences just don't tend to exist. You proceed through a linear quest line, but the world around you is unchanged. Whereas in previous games, if you killed someone, they were dead. If you blew up a town, like the quest I just described a minute ago, that town was off the map, and you were now aligned with this Tenpenny Tower and the people in it, and you would be helping them out as opposed to helping people out in Megaton and killing all the people in Tenpenny Tower. It just meant that your decisions and choices vastly changed the game that you were going to experience from then on out, even with the smallest things. If there's a feud between two people and you had to retrieve an item and you could only give it to one of them, the one you gave it to might give you opportunities that the other wouldn't, or it might make certain factions angry if you helped one and not the other. Whatever it may be, how you chose to pursue a quest or just even completing certain ones would then change the game and the world around you from there on out. And I don't want to spend any more time talking about that aspect because, frankly, I think that is almost impossible to include in a multiplayer game. You can't blow up a town and then still have it exist for the other players that are sharing the world with you, so I'm not happy it's not a part of the game, but I also fully understand why it was kind of impossible to include. So on that note, how could Bethesda incorporate NPCs in a multiplayer Fallout game in a way that would enhance the experience for just about everyone? Well, it's actually not that complicated. You don't have to look any further than many MMOs that have already existed. Using previous Fallout games as a reference point, let's say you take one of the many vast unused areas in Fallout 76's map and put a town like Megaton or Diamond City or what have you that is occupied by NPCs and just make it so those are non-combat areas. You can't engage in PvP there. You wouldn't be able to kill any of the NPCs, which might feel shitty compared to the freedom you had before, but remember, if you are following a quest and you kill whoever's in charge of that quest, if another player wants to do it, they shouldn't be blocked because you happen to execute that person in public in the world that they're sharing with you. What's possibly an even better way to incorporate this is if you were to enter these towns in isolation, whether that be by yourself or just with the people that are in your squad. So that way, if I go in and some stranger that's on the same server as me goes in, they don't need to worry about me hogging an important NPC for dialogue, or if I kill someone, ruining their questline. It'd be totally separate as soon as you open the doors and load into that new area. Before concluding, if any of you are wondering, well wait, a town suddenly popping up in the middle of West Virginia would ruin the environment that they're creating, and it would no longer feel like we're the people rebuilding the world. I disagree. You could say that this new town, insert name here, was built by other vault dwellers. These just happen to be NPC dwellers from the same vault you came out of. It's not very hard to rationalize why a town would suddenly pop up months after the vault has been open. In conclusion, before I ramble on any longer, adding NPCs in isolated areas would add so much to the game and really expand the possibilities as far as storytelling, quest lines, player choice, and just having tangible outcomes so it feels like my actions and the paths I'm pursuing actually have an impact on the world around me, and I'm just not going about in a static, unchanging world regardless of how much I'm contributing to it. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any thoughts on how NPCs could be included or how quests in general in this game could be improved, let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and hopefully get a discussion going. Yes, I think these changes are going to be a bit of a long shot, but if Bethesda wants this game to have any sort of longevity and an active player base that grows and attracts new fans rather than bleeding the current fans that bought the game upon release, these are going to be critical steps forward. DLC will help, but we're spending most of our time in this main world, and right now it feels very hollow and empty, and I really feel like adding some NPC areas and actually having dialogue of any sort would be a huge step in the right direction. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, as always. Let me know if there are any other topics that you think relate to why Fallout 76 has received such a lukewarm, yeah, it's probably a little generous, but we'll stick with that, lukewarm reception. And with that, subscribe if you want to see more Fallout 76 content, as well as other games that I might be playing in the near future. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching. Oh, and before I go, I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I am the worst singer in the wasteland. Well, in case you needed evidence, this is a little gem I recorded for the original Cold Case Quest video before I decided to switch over to this. Just don't say I didn't warn you. This is the story of a boy who got kidnapped in a stupid ploy. Yeah, he sounds so great in hollow tapes, but really he was just a psycho, a real psychopath. Dun, 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 dun.